You have 24 hours to vacate the premises or I'll have you forcibly removed. That's what HOA President Sandra Walsh screamed at my pregnant wife through our front door at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. One small problem: Sandra had no legal authority to evict anyone from their own home. What Sandra didn't know was that my son Jake works as a bodyguard for A-list celebrities, and he was about to give her a masterclass in what real security looks like. How does threatening a pregnant woman lead to an HOA president getting escorted off the property by professional security? What was Sandra hiding that made her so desperate to get us out? Drop your city in the comments if you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA board. It was 7:15 a.m. when my wife Emma called me at work, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. "David, you need to come home right now. Sandra Walsh just served me with some kind of fake eviction notice and said she's bringing enforcement officers tomorrow morning." I was in the middle of reviewing architectural plans for a new office complex, but Emma's tone made my blood run cold. "What kind of eviction notice? We own our house outright." That's what I told her. Emma's voice cracked. She said the HOA has the right to remove problematic residents who violate community standards. "David, I'm 8 months pregnant," and she was screaming at me through the door like some kind of maniac. I dropped everything and raced home to our house in Meadowbrook Estates, a quiet suburban community where we'd lived peacefully for 5 years. Emma met me at the door with a piece of paper that looked like it had been printed on someone's home computer. "Notice of immediate eviction," it read in bold letters. "By order of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA Board, residents David and Emma Morrison are required to vacate the premises within 24 hours due to repeated violations of community standards and disruptive behavior toward neighborhood leadership." I stared at the document in disbelief. "Emma, this isn't even on official letterhead. And what violations? What disruptive behavior?" I asked her the same thing, Emma said, settling carefully into her chair. At 8 months pregnant, even sitting was becoming difficult. She said questioning the HOA board's decisions constitutes insubordination, and that our attitude problem makes us incompatible with community values. Our attitude problem. Right. 3 weeks ago, we'd attended our first HOA meeting in 2 years because Sandra had proposed a $500 per household special assessment for what she called emergency landscaping improvements. When I'd asked to see detailed estimates and contractor bids, Sandra had acted like I'd personally insulted her mother. "Mr. Morrison," she'd said with icy politeness, "the board has already voted on this matter. Homeowner input is not required at this stage." "But we are homeowners," Emma had pointed out. "Don't we have a right to know how our money is being spent?" Sandra's smile had turned predatory. "Mrs. Morrison, perhaps you should focus on preparing for your baby rather than questioning decisions made by people with more experience in community management." The condescension in her tone had made my jaw clench, but Emma had handled it with grace. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm perfectly capable of being pregnant and concerned about our neighborhood finances at the same time." That exchange had apparently marked us as problematic residents in Sandra's book. Now, 3 weeks later, she was trying to evict us from our own home with a fake legal document. "David," Emma said quietly, "I'm scared. What if she really does bring people tomorrow? What if they try to force their way in while you're at work?" That's when I remembered something that made me smile for the first time since getting Emma's call. Our son Jake was in town. Jake Morrison was 28 years old, built like a linebacker, and worked as a personal protection specialist for some of the biggest names in Hollywood. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan as an Army Ranger before transitioning into private security. His client list included Oscar winners, pop stars, and at least one tech billionaire who'd been getting death threats from disgruntled employees. But to us, he was still the kid who'd built blanket forts in our living room and insisted on checking under Emma's bed for monsters when she was pregnant with his little sister. "Emma," I said, pulling out my phone, "I think it's time Sandra met our son." Jake answered on the first ring. "Hey Dad. How's Mom doing? Is the baby giving her trouble?" "Your mom's fine, but we have a different kind of problem." "Are you still in town?" "Yeah, I'm between clients for another week." What's going on?" I explained Sandra's fake eviction notice and her threats to bring enforcement officers to remove Emma from our house. By the time I finished, Jake's voice had taken on a tone I'd only heard a few times, the same tone he'd used when telling us about his military service. "Dad, let me make sure I understand this correctly. An HOA president with no legal authority threatened to forcibly remove my pregnant mother from her own home. That's about the size of it. And she's planning to bring people to intimidate Mom while you're at work?" "Tomorrow morning, according to her notice." There was a long pause. Dad, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. First, call the police non-emergency line and file a report about the threatening behavior and fake legal document. Second, install the security cameras I gave you last Christmas, all of them, tonight. Third, make sure Mom stays inside tomorrow morning and doesn't answer the door for anyone except law enforcement. Jake, we can't ask you to dash. Dad, he interrupted, and I could hear something shifting in his voice. My job is protecting people from threats. Nobody threatens my family. Nobody. The next morning at 8:30 a.m., I was at my office when Emma called with an update that made me wish I'd taken the day off. David, she's here. Sandra's here with 4 men in security uniforms and some woman with a clipboard. They're setting up some kind of command post in our driveway. I could hear voices in the background, Sandra's shrill tone carrying even through the phone. Are the cameras recording? Yes, Jake set them up last night and showed me how to live stream to his phone. He's watching everything in real time. Where is Jake now? He left early this morning. Said he had some phone calls to make and paperwork to handle. Through the phone, I could hear Sandra's voice getting louder. Mrs. Morrison, this is your final warning. Open this door immediately or we'll open it for you. Emma, do not open that door. Let me call Jake. But before I could hang up, Emma gasped. David, there's another car pulling up. Actually, there are 3 cars pulling up. 3 black SUVs had materialized in our quiet suburban street like something from a movie. They parked in perfect formation, blocking Sandra's enforcement team from leaving. Men in dark suits emerged from each vehicle, 6 of them total, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that made it clear they weren't neighborhood watch volunteers. Jake stepped out of the lead SUV, and even from Emma's description over the phone, I could picture the expression on his face. He was wearing what Emma called his work clothes, a perfectly tailored dark suit that somehow made his 6 feet 4 inches frame look even more imposing. Oh my God, Emma whispered into the phone. Jake looks like he's in charge of the Secret Service. Mrs. Morrison, I heard Sandra's voice call out, suddenly much less confident than before. Who are these people? This is a private HOM matter. Jake's voice carried clearly in the morning air, calm and professional. Ma'am, I'm going to need you and your associates to step away from that door and identify yourselves. I don't have to identify myself to you. Sandra snapped, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into her voice. This is HOA business. You have no authority here. Actually, ma'am, I have quite a bit of authority here. My name is Jake Morrison and I'm a licensed private security contractor. The woman you're harassing is my mother, and this property belongs to my family. Emma was providing live commentary in my ear. David, you should see Sandra's face. She looks like she's just realized she's in over her head. Furthermore, Jake continued, I've reviewed the document you served yesterday, and I need to inform you that impersonating legal authority and making false threats of eviction are serious crimes in this state. That's not, we have HOA authority? Sandra stammered. Ma'am, I've spent the last 18 hours researching HOA law and consulting with attorneys who specialize in property rights. Would you like me to explain exactly how many laws you've broken in the last 24 hours? One of Sandra's enforcement officers stepped forward. Look, buddy, we don't want any trouble. We're just here to do a job. The man was big, probably 6 feet 2 inches and 250 pounds of what looked like ex-bouncer muscle. But when Jake turned to look at him, the guy actually took a step backward. What job would that be, sir? Jake asked politely. Mrs. Walsh hired us to remove some problem tenants. From their own home? Well, she said. She told us they were trespassing. Sir, are you licensed for residential evictions in this state? The big man looked confused. Licensed for what now? Because residential evictions require a court order and can only be performed by certified peace officers or licensed eviction specialists. Are you either of those things? No, I'm just security. Then you're about to commit criminal trespass and potentially assault, Jake said calmly. I'd recommend you leave now before this situation gets worse for you. Emma was practically laughing now. David, 3 of Sandra's guys are already walking back to their car. One of them is on his phone. I think he's calling his boss to ask what to do. But Sandra wasn't giving up that easily. This is harassment, she screamed. I'm calling the police. Please do, Jake replied. I've already filed a report about your threatening behavior toward my pregnant mother. I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing about your fake eviction attempts. That's when Sandra made her biggest mistake of the day. Your mother is a troublemaker who doesn't belong in this community, she shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at our front door. She asked too many questions and undermined my authority. I don't care who you think you are, I run this neighborhood. Jake's voice dropped to a tone that made Emma shiver even through the phone. Ma'am, did you just admit to retaliating against homeowners for asking questions about community finances? That's not what I said. Because I have everything you just said recorded on multiple devices, and retaliation against homeowners for attending board meetings is a violation of state HOA law. You can't record me without permission. Actually, ma'am, you're on private property belonging to my family, and this state has single-party consent laws for recordings. But more importantly, Jake gestured to one of his team members who approached with a tablet. Mrs. Walsh, my name is Marcus Rodriguez, and I'm a licensed private investigator specializing in financial crimes. While you've been threatening the Morrison family, I've been reviewing your HOA's financial records. Sandra's face went white. You can't do that. Those are private. Actually, ma'am, HOA financial records are required to be available to homeowners upon request. And what we found is very interesting. Rodriguez consulted his tablet. In the past 2 years, Meadowbrook Estates HOA has collected $347,000 in special assessments for various emergency improvements. However, we can only find receipts and documentation for about $89,000 in actual work performed. That's confidential board business. Ma'am, where is the missing $258,000? Sandra was looking around desperately now like a trapped animal. Her enforcement team had dwindled to just one guy, and he was edging toward his car. This is a witch hunt, she screamed. You people are ganging up on me because I try to maintain community standards. Jake stepped closer, and his voice took on the kind of authority that comes from years of protecting people who receive actual death threats. Mrs. Walsh, here's what's going to happen. You and your remaining associate are going to leave this property immediately. You're going to stop harassing my parents. And you're going to resign from the HOA board before we file formal charges for financial misconduct and abuse of authority. You can't make me resign. You're right, I can't. But the State Attorney General's office can investigate financial irregularities in HOA management. And the FBI can look into wire fraud if money was moved across state lines. Rodriguez held up his tablet. Mrs. Walsh, would you like to explain why $75,000 in HOA funds was transferred to a company called Walsh Property Services last month? Sandra's last remaining hired muscle decided he'd heard enough. Lady, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but I'm out. He tossed what looked like a uniform shirt onto the ground and walked to his car. Sandra stood alone in our driveway, facing 6 professional security specialists and a private investigator who'd apparently unraveled whatever scheme she'd been running. This isn't over, she said weakly. Yes, ma'am, it is, Jake replied. Because if you contact my family again, if you set foot on this property again, or if you continue any form of harassment, I will personally ensure that every relevant law enforcement agency receives detailed reports of your activities. Sandra stumbled back to her car, no longer the confident HOA dictator who'd threatened my pregnant wife 24 hours earlier. After she left, Jake came inside to check on Emma, and I raced home from work to hear the full story. Jake, I said, still processing everything, how did you organize all of this so quickly? He grinned, the same grin he'd had as a kid when he'd successfully defended his sister from playground bullies. Dad, my job is threat assessment and protection. When someone threatens my family, I treat it like any other client situation. But the financial investigation, the legal research. Rodriguez is a friend from my military days. He runs a private investigation firm that specializes in white-collar crime. When I explained what Sandra was doing, he offered to help pro bono. Emma was sitting in her favorite chair, looking more relaxed than she had in weeks. Jake, that was the most professional demolition of a bully I've ever seen. Mom, dealing with entitled people who think money and position give them the right to threaten others is literally what I do for a living. Sandra was amateur hour compared to some of the stalkers and scam artists my clients face. The aftermath of Sandra's failed eviction attempt was swift and satisfying. 2 days later, the police arrested Sandra Walsh on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of authority. Rodriguez's investigation had uncovered a systematic scheme where Sandra had been skimming money from HOA special assessments for years. The missing $258,000 had gone to her personal accounts through her fake company, Walsh Property Services. She'd been using HOA funds to pay for her own home improvements while telling homeowners the money was for community projects. The fake eviction attempt was her desperate way of getting rid of the one family that had started asking uncomfortable questions about the finances. Sandra was also charged with harassment and making false legal threats after the police reviewed the recordings from Jake's security team. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Sandra from her position. They also voted to hire an independent auditor to review all financial records going back 5 years. Emma gave birth to our daughter Sarah 3 weeks later, a healthy 7-pound baby who slept peacefully in her nursery while Jake's security cameras kept watch over our property. You know what's funny? Emma said as we sat in the hospital room, watching Jake hold his new sister with the same gentle precision he used for everything else. Sandra thought she could intimidate us because we seemed like easy targets. She didn't know our son takes protection very seriously, I replied. Jake looked up from the baby with a smile. Nobody messes with my family. That's not a threat, it's just a fact. 6 months later, Sandra Walsh was sentenced to 3 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. The court ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, though everyone knew she'd probably never have that kind of money again. The community elected new leadership that actually focused on maintaining the neighborhood rather than power trips and financial schemes. And Jake? He started offering HOA security consultations for families dealing with abusive board members. Turns out there was a huge market for professional security advice in suburban communities plagued by power-hungry HOA dictators. Best part of the job, he told me during one of his visits, is that most of these bullies back down the moment they realize they're not dealing with helpless victims anymore. Emma and I still live in Meadowbrook Estates, but now it's actually the peaceful community we'd always wanted. No more fake eviction notices, no more financial schemes, and no more HOA presidents who think they can threaten pregnant women. Sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is to remind them that some families have very good security.